This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. What I Saw in America by G.K. Chesterton. Section 30, Chapter 17. The Spirit of America. I suggest that diplomatists of the internationalist school should spend some of their money on staging farces and comedies of cross purposes, founded on the curious and prevalent idea that England and America have the same language. I know, of course, that we both inherit the glorious tongue of Shakespeare, not to mention the tune of the musical glasses. But there have been moments when I thought that if we spoke Greek and they spoke Latin, we might understand each other better. For Greek and Latin are at least fixed, while American at least is still very fluid. I do not know the American language, and therefore I do not claim to distinguish between the American language and the American slang. But I know that highly theatrical developments might follow on taking the words of part of the English slang or the English language. I have already given the example of calling a person a regular guy, which in the States is a graceful expression of respect and esteem, but which on the stage, properly handled, might surely lead the way towards a divorce or duel or something lively. Sometimes coincidence merely clinches a mistake, as it so often clinches a misprint. Every proofreader knows that the worst misprint is not that which makes nonsense, but that which makes sense. Not that which is obviously wrong, but that which is hideously right. He who has essayed to write "he got the book" and has found it rendered mysteriously as "he got the boob" is pensively resigned. It is when it is rendered quite lucidly as "he got the boot" that he is moved to a more passionate mood of regret. I have had conversations in which this sort of accident would have wholly misled me, if another accident had not come to the rescue. An American friend of mine was telling me of his adventures as a cinema producer down in the Southwest, where real Indians were procurable. He said that certain Indians were very bad actors. It passed for me as a very ordinary remark on a very ordinary or natural deficiency. It would hardly seem a crushing criticism to say that some wild Arab chieftain was not very good at imitating a farmyard, or that the Grand Lama of Tibet was rather clumsy at making paper boats. But the remark might be natural in a man travelling in a paper boat or touring with an invisible farmyard for his menagerie. As my friend was a cinema producer, I supposed he meant that the Indians were bad cinema actors. But the phrase has really a high and austere moral meaning, which my levity had wholly missed. A bad actor means a man whose actions are bad or morally reprehensible. So that I might have embraced the Red Indian who was dripping with gore or covered with atrocious crimes, imagining there was nothing the matter with him beyond a mistaken choice of the theatrical profession. Surely there are here the elements of a play, not to mention a cinema play. Surely a New England village maiden might find herself among the wigwams in the power of the formidable and fiendish little blue bison, merely through her mistaken sympathy with his financial failure as a film star. The notion gives me glimpses of all sorts of dissolving views of primeval forests and flamboyant theatres. But this impulse of irrelevant theatrical production must be curbed. There is one example, however, of this complication of language, actually used in contrary senses, about which the same figure can be used to illustrate a more serious fact. Suppose that in such an international interlude an English girl and an American girl are talking about the fiancé of the former, who is coming to call. The English girl will be haughty and aristocratic on the stage. The American girl will, of course, have short hair and skirts and will be cynical, Americans being more completely free from cynicism than any people in the world. It is the great glory of Americans that they are not cynical. For that matter, English aristocrats are hardly ever haughty. They understand the game much better than that. But on the stage, anyhow, The American girl may say, referring to her friend's fiancé, with a cynical wave of the cigarette, "I suppose he's bound to come and see you." And at this the blue blood of the Vere de Vere will boil over. The English lady will be deeply wounded and insulted at the suggestion that her lover only comes to see her because he is forced to do so. A staggering stage quarrel will then ensue, and things will go from bad to worse, until the arrival of an interpreter who can talk both English and American. He stands between the two ladies, waving two pocket dictionaries, and explains the error on which the quarrel turns. It is very simple, like the seed of all tragedies. In English, "he is bound to come and see you" means that he is obliged or constrained to come and see you. In America it does not. In America it means that he is bent on coming to see you, that he is irrevocably resolved to do so, and will surmount any obstacle to do it. The two young ladies will then embrace as the curtain falls. Now, when I was lecturing in America, I was often told in a radiant and congratulatory manner that such and such a person was bound to come and hear me lecture. It seemed a very cruel form of conscription, and I could not understand what authority could have made it compulsory. In the course of discovering my error, however, I thought I began to understand certain American ideas and instincts that lie behind this American idiom. For as I have urged before, and shall often urge again, the road to international friendship is through really understanding jokes. It is, in a sense, through taking jokes seriously. It is quite legitimate to laugh at a man who walks down the street in 3 white hats and green dressing gown because he is unfamiliar. But, after all, the man has some reason for what he does, and until we know the reason we do not understand the story, or even understand the joke. So the outlander will always seem outlandish in costume or custom. But serious relations depend on our getting beyond the fact of difference to the things wherein it differs. A good symbolical figure for all this may be found among the people who say, perhaps with a self-revealing simplicity, that they are bound to go to a lecture. If I were asked for a single symbolic figure summing up the whole of what seems eccentric and interesting about America to an Englishman, I should be satisfied to select that one lady who complained of Mr. Asquith's lecture and wanted her money back. I do not mean that she was typically American in complaining. Far from it. I, for one, have a great and guilty knowledge of all that amiable American audiences will endure without complaint. I do not mean that she was typically American in wanting her money. Quite the contrary. That sort of American spends money rather than hoards it. And when we convict them of vulgarity, we acquit them of avarice. Where she was typically American, summing up a truth individual and indescribable in any other way, is that she used these words: "I've risen from a sick bed to come and hear her, and I want my money back." The element in that which really amuses an Englishman is precisely the element which, properly analysed, ought to make him admire an American. But my point is that only by going through the amusement can he reach the admiration. The amusement is the vision of a tragic sacrifice for what is avowedly a rather trivial object. Mrs. Asquith is a candid lady of considerable humour, and I feel sure she does not regard the experience of hearing her read her diary as an ecstasy for which the sick should thus suffer martyrdom. She also is English, and had no other claim but to amuse Americans, and possibly to be amused by them. This being so, it is rather as if somebody said, "I have risked my life in fire and pestilence to find my way to the music hall," or "I have fasted 40 days in the wilderness, sustained by the hope of seeing Totty Toddles do her new dance." And there is something rather more subtle involved here. There is something in an Englishman which would make him feel faintly ashamed of saying that he had fasted to hear Totty Toddles, or risen from a sick bed to hear Mrs. Asquith. He would feel that it was undignified to confess that he had wanted mere amusement so much, and perhaps that he had wanted anything so much. He would not like, so to speak, to be seen rushing down the street after Totty Toddles, or after Mrs. Asquith, or perhaps after anybody. But there is something in it